And welcome. Good evening. Thanks for joining us for the Northwest Eco Building Guild September education event, Building Resiliency Through Home Electrification. My name is Nina Olivier, and I am the Northwest Eco Building Guild's event coordinator. And by day, I am the sustainability manager at Rushing Engineering. It's great to have everyone here. The Northwest Eco Building Guild is a nonprofit organization dedicated to educating the public, builders, architects, developers, designers, and anyone interested in all about green building, specifically in the residential and multifamily areas. So welcome. We have some regional chapters in and around the South Sound, quite a few active members all the way up to BC and Vancouver. So we want to welcome everyone. And we have a couple announcements this evening before we get into presentations and some sponsor highlights. First, I'd like to provide a land acknowledgement. The Northwest Eco Building Guild acknowledges that we work on the unceded traditional land of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, original stewards of the land past and present where we are based. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. I will post in the chat a local resource, an organization called Real Rent. You can do something today to stand in solidarity with the first peoples of this land by paying Real Rent. All funds go directly to the Duwamish Tribal Services to support the revival of Duwamish culture and the vitality of the Duwamish tribe. We also welcome you all to learn about the traditional Indigenous lands you live on. We recognize that not everyone is joining us from Seattle this evening. And we will post in the chat the Native Lands website to explore the native lands you're currently living on. So welcome. Again, I'm Nina Olivier. If you have any questions, my email and phone number I'll post in the chat, but it's there on the screen as well. Especially if you have any logistical or connection challenges, please let me know. I can help get you back on. This event is being recorded, and a recording of this event will be made for all folks who registered through Eventbrite, and of course, all of our Northwest Eco Building Guild members, which I'll get into a little bit more. Please mute your microphones during the presentations. There's about 2.5, I would say, presentations tonight. We have some really wonderful speakers joining us, and then just a short presentation at the end. There'll be time after each presentation for a question and answer session. And then I like to kind of, as if we were in person, kind of leave it open for any discussion or any further questions at the very end of the event. If folks want to, we've had some fun deep dive discussions on specific topics before, and it's just fun time for folks to turn on their cameras if they feel comfortable and unmute and just engage in conversation. I'd like to give a couple sponsor highlights tonight. Without their sponsorship, these events would not be made possible. First sponsor highlight I'd like to give is to Pathway Design and Construction. They create beautiful, intelligently designed living spaces for discerning homeowners in the greater Puget Sound area. They were founded in 2008 and boasts a team of well over 100 years of combined experience. They have full service remodeling that uses sustainable, efficient processes and materials to craft healthy homes that enhance the lives of their clients. Led by brothers Paul and Mike Kacharhook, Pathway was Seattle's first BIAW certified builder, as well as have earned an array of awards from BIAW, Master Builders Association, the Home Builder Digest, Pro Remodeler, and others. They've also been recognized as a Guild Master several times for service excellence. More important than accolades, however, it's Pathway's mission, which ultimately extends beyond designing and building the places where people live, work, and play. Thank you, Pathway, for remaining just a wonderful sponsor and support of the Northwest Eco Building Guild for several years now. Thank you. 475 High Performance Building Supply is our next sponsor we'd like to highlight. 475 has a passion for building science, sustainable material use, and passive house, for protecting the environment and making the world a better place. Consequently, 475's mission to supply essential materials, building components, and knowledge that will lead transformation of the North American construction industry toward making durable, high-performance, passive house, and zero-energy buildings. They excel because they offer best-in-class products with a highly specialized focus through peer-to-peer communication, and launched on a business-to-business interface, which is just great. You can use their online tools. They're fabulous. They deliver our products in a timely manner from centrally located warehouses in our region, and through stocking lumber yards throughout the Pacific Northwest. They support with intense attention to customer service, building code recommendations, hydrothermal modeling, bountiful knowledge resources, and on-the-ground representatives. Thanks, 475. And then lastly, King County Green Tools. We'd like to thank them for their sponsorship this evening. The King County Green Tools program is designed to help all King County stakeholders green their built environment while addressing critical environmental issues such as global warming, habitat restoration, solid waste reduction, and community planning. The Green Tools program provides technical assistance, hands-on training, and policy development through community partnerships in public and private sectors. I will be posting links to each of our sponsor websites in the chat. Thanks again so much to our sponsors. Also, I have some fun announcements for upcoming events this evening. So I'm going to hand it actually over to Kate. If you're online, please give us the update on the upcoming Northwest Green Building Slam.
I am, Nina. Thank you so much. If you can hear me, hopefully.
Yeah, you sound great.
Awesome. So good to be here. Thank you so much for having me. So we are so excited about the upcoming Green Building Slam. As always, the wonderful team that is organizing from the guilds has put together a wonderful slam this year. We have a wonderful lineup of presenters that are going to just bring you an awesome presentation, a great lineup. It's going to be entertaining. You're going to get to connect with just some of the most wonderful people from if you have not had an opportunity to connect in person with some of the people from this wonderful group that we work with in person, I highly recommend it. It's really just such a wonderful evening. Plus, the Seattle Town Hall is a really great venue. So if you haven't had an opportunity, we still have some tickets left. It's not a huge venue, so I would highly encourage you to go ahead and grab your tickets. You can scan that QR code that's right there on the right-hand side of your screen and grab your tickets. And until 10 p.m. tonight, if you use the code EDSESSION, EDSESSION, short for education session, you're going to get 10% off, which is $5 off for guild members or $7 off for non-guild members. On that website, you'll get that discounted ticket, and that's only until 10 p.m. tonight. So go ahead and grab your tickets, and you can grab one for you, one for your partner that you're bringing with you, and we would just love to see you at that slam. Like I said, we have some awesome presenters, a limited number of tickets. It's coming up here on October 14th. If for any reason that QR code isn't working for you, you can go to Northwest Green, spelled out, northwestgreen.org/ticketing or bit.ly/greenslam2023 and get to the tickets that way as well. And if you have any questions, you can go to northwestgreen.org and find us that way as well. And we really, really look forward to seeing you all there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kate. I've also posted in the chat the link to the website, as well as the promo code you just provided and other resources and for our sponsors.
Awesome.
Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks. Looking forward to that event. Wonderful. Also, we have a education retreat meeting. So as you may or may not know, one of the wonderful programs that we provide here at the Northwest Eco Building Guild are these monthly education sessions, which we will be providing hybrid options for next year. So in-person and virtual ways to connect, network, and of course, attend these educational programs. And every month we come up with new topics, and we need your help discerning what you want to learn about as it pertains to green building here in our region. So please join us for that education retreat. I'll also provide a link to fill out a topic survey if any of you are interested in filling out what topics you'd like to learn about next year. And our education committee does the work of acquiring those speakers and that insight to present to you the latest and greatest innovative knowledge around each topic area. Perfect example, last month we had biophilic design, and this month is our building resiliency through home electrification. So just really fun topics that are every month that we coordinate for you, and would love your input and insight on what you want to see for next year. And that is taking place on October 3rd. So next week on Tuesday. And I'm excited to announce the Northwest Eco Building Guild's membership program will now include hard hat tours, and Targa Homes is going to be our first builder that will be hosting these. So for folks that are members of the Northwest Eco Building Guild, keep an eye out on the newsletter for the date and time these hard hat tours are going to be made available. Sean Conta with Targa Homes will be opening up his latest project and providing a small workshop on the latest and greatest they are working on for some really cool, innovative green building design through tight building envelopes and great ventilation strategies. So we don't want to miss that. And then lastly, as I mentioned before, please consider becoming a member today. The Northwest Eco Building Guild membership program provides member-only content, event replays, and now on-site tours and workshops. They also provide discounted pricing on all events. Once you become a member, your organization and or company will be featured on our Green Pages directory, which we often send out to folks that are inquiring about green builders, vendors, designers, architects in the region. Whatever your company is, we'd love to feature on our Green Pages directory. We also have technical expert forums. If you have an interesting question about discerning the new Washington State Energy Code that's coming around the corner, or if you have a building envelope that you're trying to lower the R value of, we've got technical experts that are ready to help you answer some questions. And of course, networking opportunities. So please consider becoming a member today. And I posted a link in the chat where you can learn more. Wonderful. So that concludes our announcements. And now the fun part. I'm super excited to present tonight's speakers. Tonight we have Kirk Haffner. He's the president and electrical administrator for South Sound Solar. Kirk graduated from Evergreen State College with a BA and BS and completed the 2-year teacher education program. He became an award-winning high school math, chemistry, and physics teacher. Kirk earned his master's in physics in 1996 from UW. In 2006, Kirk decided to follow his passion for renewable energy and conceived South Sound Solar. He now leads an experienced team of electricians, project managers, and solar advisors. South Sound Solar is a leading installer in the area for residential, commercial, battery backup, off-grid systems. South Sound Solar is also a Tesla Energy certified installer and installs electric vehicle chargers. Notable commercial installs include Tenino High School, Centralia College, Providence Centralia Hospital, Olympia City Hall, the Olympia Farmers Market, and so much more. South Sound Solar employs a grant specialist to administer state, PSC, federal grants, and have secured over 30 USDA REAP grants. South Sound Solar also walks the talk. The business produces over 90% of the electricity we need. They have battery backup for their shop and office, and Kirk built his own electric car in 2009, which I want to hear more about. That's awesome, which is still on the road. Kirk's clean energy commitment drives South Sound Solar to work with customers to reduce their energy consumption, choose energy efficient transition from gas, and generate their own resilient solar electricity. Welcome, Kirk, this evening. We're so excited to have you here. And we also have Brian Stewart. Welcome, Brian, co-founder of Electrify Now. Brian has 30 years of experience in product design, manufacturing, innovation, and sustainability. He began his career as an industrial designer at IDEO and has held various senior leadership roles in footwear and apparel product creation at Nike, including Vice President of Sustainable Innovation, where he directed projects and created tools to deliver on corporate sustainability goals. He has spoken at group events and made presentations about benefits of electrification to leadership and employee groups at Nike, Adidas, Google, Bank of America, Vans, Grid Ford, and numerous other organizations around the United States. Brian, we are so excited to have you this evening. Welcome. And that is our speakers. Tonight, we are going to kick it off actually with Brian. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing. And Brian, I believe I have provided you co-host abilities, which should allow you to share your screen. And welcome this evening. We're so lucky to have you.
Great, thank you. Nina, thanks for the introduction, and hello, everyone. I hope you can see that all right.
Yeah,
I'm just getting all the little technical stuff sorted out here. Okay, so sorry, I'm having a little bit of a tricky thing. Okay, that should work. All right, so thanks. Yeah, I am. I started. My wife and I started Electrify Now actually because we were sort of frustrated because there wasn't good information available to regular people about all the amazing things we can do in our own homes. And so tonight, what we're going to be talking about is just some very specific Washington information about how electrification of our homes makes our homes more comfortable and healthier, and lowers carbon emissions and lowers energy bills, which a lot of people really care about, obviously, as they're making decisions about what to do in their own homes. But there's also resiliency and grid efficiency benefits from electrification, which we'll be touching on as well. So let's see if we can advance here. Okay, that's not working. Screen sharing is paused. Sorry, I'm having a little technical problem here.
No worries. Do you want to try stop sharing and resharing? Sometimes that helps.
Yeah, let me just
We're putting your slides into.
So I'm on a different system than I normally do this, so it's giving me a little bit of a challenge. Okay, let's try it this way, see if this works better. Okay, are you seeing that now?
Yeah, that looks great.
Okay, so what makes this possible, a lot of what we're going to be talking about, there's a lot of things on the grid side that I won't go into as much detail with, but in our homes, the thing that makes all this possible is this, a massive array of, man, what is going on here? It's not letting me advance the slides. That is just bizarre. Let me try one last thing here. Sorry, folks.
No worries.
This is Zoom foo. Okay, see if that's working now. That is just the weirdest thing. I've never seen this before. I don't know what's going on here. It's not letting me advance. I'm gonna try one last thing here. Hold on just a second. My apologies, everyone. Let's try this one more time.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, this looks like it's working. Okay, so what makes this possible are these these new devices, these new products that some people are just completely unfamiliar with. But these things outperform the devices we grew up with and add value to our homes, but they really reduce energy costs dramatically, reduce carbon emissions accordingly, and they also support this grid interactive technologies, which will be so important for a really resilient grid of the future. And this is collectively referred to as electrification. I'm sure you have heard of many of these things before. And also, I'm sure you've heard of what I consider, or at least some people consider the bad news. I guess it is bad news, really, that we basically have to stop burning fossil fuels to get all these benefits that we rely on: electricity, transportation, and heat. In Washington, about 25% of Washington emissions come from generating electricity, almost 40% from transportation, and another 20% or more from heat, for heating our buildings and for industry. And I like to remind people that natural gas, we've been fed a lot of misinformation about that. More and more information. In fact, there's just a article in the New York Times today about new studies that show that natural gas is similar or worse than coal in terms of its complete climate impacts. We've known that for some time, but I think the data about it's getting better and better. It's also a major source of air pollution, which a lot of people don't appreciate, but in California, it's becoming, for example, one of the main sources of air pollution. And then we also hear a lot about renewable natural gas and other synthetic methane products that for sure will have some role to play in transitioning our economies off of fossil fuels. But the idea that we'll just be able to pump renewable natural gas into all of our homes to heat them is a pipe dream. Sorry for that pun, but it's just completely not possible or realistic. So it's really a marketing ploy from a lot of the gas utilities and gas industry to slow down this transition. But that's the bad news. But the good news is that wind and solar are now the lowest cost sources of new energy. And the prices per megawatt hour of these, you can see the two white lines there, have plummeted over the last 20 years. And now it's the cheapest way to make new energy. And projections are that it will go even lower. And that is because unlike fossil fuels, which are commodities basically, which have to be extracted, there are economies of scale that come with producing the technologies that make solar and wind possible, solar panels, wind turbines, et cetera. And the more you make of them, the more clever you are about how to make them, it reduces the cost. And so there's projections for wind and solar to continue to reduce in cost, which is really very good news, particularly since there's so much sun and wind available. So the other thing that's happening is that electric appliances, many of which we are familiar with, are just getting dramatically more efficient. And I love doing this comparison of a few things that we're familiar with. Gas furnaces and water heaters, by the way, this is not true. They're essentially the same level of efficiency that they were 30 years ago. The minimum efficiency standard for both those devices has only improved by 2% since 1990. Whereas heat pumps, the minimum requirements are 30% greater than they were 30 years ago. Air conditioners, 40%. Dishwashers are 100% more energy efficient today than they were. That means they use half the energy. Refrigerators, 155%. And a heat pump water heater, one of the things we'll be talking about, is 270% more efficient than a electric resistance water heater, which makes it 3 to 5 times more energy efficient. And then, of course, LED light bulbs, which are sort of the poster child for electrification in some ways, 500% more efficient than incandescent bulbs. So what that means is that we are using about the same amount of electricity now that we were 20 years ago, even though we have more people in the United States and we have more devices that are use electricity. But because of this efficiency, we're not using a lot more than we were. Now, this is going to go up because of transportation electrification primarily. But the news is that efficiency has basically allowed us to not have to add a lot of new generation over the last 20 years. And during that time, our electricity has gotten a lot cleaner. The white line shows emissions from electricity, which have plummeted and which will keep reducing as we add more and more renewables. So all those things, these cheap renewable energy, the need to get off fossil fuels, really efficient electric devices, all these things add up to this idea that we should be electrifying everything. Obviously, people are using this terminology more and more, but it really conjures up this sustainable future where the wind and sun powers all of our primary energy needs, electricity, transportation, and heat. And that comes with these amazing side benefits of energy cost savings. We'll talk a little bit about that. Cleaner air, I mean, think about that for a minute. Where does air pollution come from? I mean, apart from wildfires, which are indirectly related to fossil fuels, all the direct pollution that we see is a result, for the most part, of burning fossil fuels. And so that gets eliminated when we electrify everything. There's cleaner and more available water. There's vast amounts of water that are used for processing fossil fuels that can be as high as 40% in some places like Texas. Most places it's less, but even 10% is not unusual. And that's a lot of clean water that could be used for other purposes. Obviously, all this would lead to healthier people, and when we reduce our healthcare costs and our energy costs, it means our economy gets stronger. So there's a lot of reasons to be excited about electrification besides just the carbon benefits. but we're going to talk a lot about those carbon benefits tonight. An easy way to get a sense of how powerful this is to think about a typical home where 60% of a typical household's carbon emissions come from the fossil fuels that are used. They're burned essentially to create the energy that they need. And the four largest sources of emissions are the electricity we consume. For a typical home in Washington, it's about 3 to 6 tons of carbon emissions. If you're on PSE, that's probably the range you're in. If you're a Seattle Lights customer or a Snohomish PUD customer, or maybe another municipal PUD, they're getting most of your electricity from hydro. It would be dramatically less than that. So I kind of like this as a comparison of where we are today and where Washington is going with laws that mandate renewable energy. But regardless, today the average in Washington is pretty close to 3 to 6 tons. A car would be 4 to 8. A gas furnace about the same, and a gas water heater surprisingly high in terms of emissions at 1 to 3 tons. And obviously, this will vary depending on the size of your home, how much hot water you use, how far you drive, what kind of mileage you have, et cetera. But these are average numbers that are very typical for a home in Washington. If you are combining renewable energy and electrification, it can completely eliminate those energy emissions. You can get your energy from renewable sources. It's possible to do that today. You can use that energy to charge your EV and produce zero emissions for your transportation, zero emissions for your heating and your air conditioning, and zero emissions for your water heating. So for a typical home, rather than that would be on average creating 15 to 25 tons of carbon emissions just from the energy that it consumes with 2 cars, that same home would be producing 0 tons of carbon emissions if it was using renewable energy and these electrification strategies, which we'll talk about. And one of the exciting things about this is it would dramatically cut energy expenses. A typical home in Washington State that's using gas for heating and has 2 automobiles, which is pretty much the average, would be spending about $7,300 on energy between electricity, gasoline, and natural gas. And that reduces to $2,700 with these electrification strategies. You will see as we get into it, the big savings is from transportation, but there's savings in heating and water heating as well that are significant. All right, so the technologies that make this possible are heat pump water heaters, heat pumps for space heating, induction ranges that eliminate their need for gas in our homes for cooking. You can even use electric fireplace inserts to eliminate gas fireplaces. And of course, heat pump dryers are the most efficient way to dry our clothes. And then of course, electric vehicles. These are the things that homeowners in particular need to be aware of because many people have not heard of these technologies before. And of course, the quicker we scale these technologies, the more we will, we're likely will be to hit our carbon goals. So heat pump water heaters, to start with, most people care about reliable hot water, and they're an excellent source for that. They're the lowest way to heat water, which we'll see in a minute. A lot of people worry about new technologies. They have a typically 10-year product warranties, which is out. Most water heaters are 6 years. So it shows you that the manufacturers are confident about this technology. And then they have this ability to be grid interactive, which we'll talk about, which makes them work basically like a battery, which is part of what is so important as we want to get a more resilient grid. They look just like regular water heaters. They're made by most of the regular manufacturers. I'm sure a lot of you on this call are familiar with this technology. I'm excited about this 120-volt version of the units which are coming out. Rheem was the first to introduce theirs. A.O. Smith has one coming out soon. Bradford White as well. What this means is that instead of having to run a 240-volt circuit, if you're replacing a gas water heater, because typically gas water heaters don't have that capability, that capacity circuit right nearby. So you often have to run a new circuit and even add a new breaker to your panel. Now you can use an existing circuit. It doesn't even have to be a dedicated circuit with 120 volts and get all the hot water you need. And basically it works by heating the water up to really high temperatures, much hotter than you would be able to use for domestic hot water, but then it has a mixing valve. So you mix it with cold water and get essentially this heat pump that's continually operating that provides this huge reservoir of hot water. So I'm excited about that new version. In case you're interested, we'll be doing a webinar on that coming up in the next couple of months. But check out the costs of operation here for a typical, the 4 standard type of technologies that we see a lot: electric storage, which in many parts of the country are the most expensive, but because Washington electricity is relatively cheap compared to gas, even a gas storage water heater is more expensive in Washington than electric. And a gas tankless will save you a little bit, but not as much as a lot of people think. And a heat pump blows everything away in terms of cost. It's about 1/3 or 1/4 of the cost of any of those others. And also from a carbon emissions standpoint, it is much better. And of course, if you're using a renewable energy, you have solar panels on your roof, as we'll be hearing about later, those emissions from your heat pump water heater would be 0. So that's one of the reasons why it's really easy to get excited about these things. The demand response capability is also another reason to be excited. The new standards for these demand that they have the capability for demand response, which means that they can be connected to Wi-Fi. And a lot of utilities are starting to experiment with this now, where they would be able, if they knew they were having a peak event coming up, which is pretty easy to predict for the utilities on a hot day in summer or a cold day in winter, they know this is happening. And they know when they're going to see those big spikes, which would normally mean that they have to put an expensive gas peaker plant online. Instead, they could have everyone's hot water heater turn on before the event and make sure that you've got plenty of hot water, and then keep it off during the event to reduce peak loads. And so that's a really exciting thing, a demand response capability that these devices have. They're basically like batteries, because that water will stay warm for hours, even when your water heater is not turned on. Heat pumps for space heating and air conditioning are becoming more popular in the United States. I'll show you later, they're starting to be the most popular choice, but they're still unfamiliar to a lot of people. And they're attractive because they provide heating and cooling. And even in the Northwest here, it's getting to the point where air conditioning is less of a luxury and more of a necessity. They also provide much more constant air temperatures, which can translate to more comfort, because they're offered more continuously. There's more air movement through the filters, which means your air is cleaner, but it also means that warm air is more likely getting to every part of your home, as opposed to a gas furnace, which turns on with insanely high temperatures. Gas combusts at 4,000 degrees, way too hot of a temperature to be useful. So you have to waste a lot of that heat. You also have to just have it come on intermittently, which means that it's likely that you've got warm spots and cold spots in your home. This is why people like to sit next to the vents in a gas heated home. But in a heat pump heated home, that's less of an issue, that your whole house should be essentially the same temperature. And this is a great way to avoid a lot of carbon emissions. There's also, I run into this all the time. It's definitely a hurdle that a lot of installers really will say, yeah, sure, we'll put in a heat pump, but you should have a gas backup. That's just completely unnecessary. Now that the technology is getting better and better and more efficient, you can get these devices which will stay at nearly 100% capacity down to -5 degrees, which for our climate is just way more than we even need. But even a good heat pump may need electric resistance backup heat on the very coldest days, but you're talking about hours of that a year, which means that it's really not something to be too concerned about. But the idea that we need to have gas furnace to back up our heat pumps is just not true, but something you still hear a lot from installers, unfortunately. But here you can see the cost of operation. A few people still have oil furnaces. They're not so popular here on the East Coast. They're very popular, but there's still a few of them around, particularly in the urban areas. Electric baseboard heat is quite expensive. Even where your electricity is cheap, it's still dramatically more expensive than a gas furnace. And you can see a heat pump here will be the cheapest way to heat your home. And then if you look at the carbon emissions from this, again, this is using standard Washington carbon emission intensities. So this will improve. And over the life of the unit, it's most likely that those carbon emissions will be close to 0. These can also be used in a demand response way, which means that if you have peak loads coming up in the summer, let's say, you can make sure that air conditioners are on in the afternoon, early afternoon, so that when people come home from work and you get those peak events that typically happen around 4 or 5 o'clock and last for a few hours, you could have the air conditioning not running then and still have your temperatures in your home be very comfortable because the air conditioner came on before you came home from work. So those are the types of things that make huge differences in terms of energy efficiency and resilience, because you suddenly have a grid that's just operating more effectively with less likelihood of problems and less need for these peaking loads, which are kind of crazy if you think about it, but that's the way our electric system is designed, where it's not designed for standard loads, it's designed for those once every year maximum loads. And so we have the system that's way bigger than we need because of those peak times that we have to prepare for. There's also some really interesting things happening with portable heat pumps, which typically aren't as effective in cold weather, but can really take a chunk out of your heating bill if you have a gas furnace, or maybe you're in an apartment where you can't switch away from gas or electric baseboard. These portable units, and they come in window or these rolling units like this, and there's some really interesting versions that are will be around next year. That will be more expensive, but more capable. These that are available now typically cost around $500 or $700, somewhere in that range. Will only operate down to about 40 degrees, but are really effective for air conditioning, as well as some supplemental heat for those shoulder seasons. There are cold climate versions of these coming out, which are really interesting. They're window mounted versions, kind of saddleback configuration for around $3,000. But the interesting thing about that is that that's a DIY project. You don't need a contractor to come do it. So it could be a really interesting way to get people into heat pumps in a lower cost way, and obviously great for renters and multifamily situations. Okay, so electric vehicles. I'm not going to talk too much, by the way, of around induction, because I think you're going to hear more about that later. But I do want to talk about electric vehicles. Obviously, there's a lot of news about this, but the thing that a lot of people don't appreciate, besides the fact that they're just dramatically higher performance than a gas car, is that they have just such dramatically lower operating costs and maintenance costs that they're just, the economics of them are almost too good to be true. First of all, and one of the reasons why the automobile industry knows they just can't ignore this, and why it's such a big deal in terms of shipping. And I know up there you're probably seeing those electric vans from Amazon that are driving around now. But check this out. I love this comparison. This is the Hyundai Kona. They make two versions of this car, a gas version and an electric version. It's exactly the same car with a different drivetrain. And for $10 worth of gas in Washington, you can go 62 miles in the Hyundai Kona, the gas version. The electric version, for $10 worth of electricity, you can go 400 miles. So this is why electric vehicles are just so exciting. It's one of the reasons, is because they're just so much more energy efficient. And that translates, of course, into huge savings in terms of carbon emissions. You're talking about 1.2 versus 3.9 for a typical Hyundai, and any electric car, it's going to be similar kind of comparison. Typically, a lot of gas cars, this is a relatively small car, so a lot of gas cars would be more like 4 or 8 tons. But the electric car is always be. But this is the other thing that I think is really important for people to understand, is that these cars are way cheaper than you think they are. And the reason why people think that they're more expensive is because of the sticker price comparison. That's the easiest comparison to make. And so I love this, again, because this is the Kona apples to apples comparison. It's hard to compare, like, for instance, the Tesla. What would you compare it to? There's not a comparable vehicle there to compare to. But in this case, these cars are the same except for the drivetrain. So it's $10,000 more expensive for the EV, which is shocking a little bit at first. Though by that, I'd say this has come down. It used to be more like 13,000 more 3 years ago, and it's projected to come even closer there. Some people say these are going to achieve parity sometime soon, but they won't until we start making more of these. They make way more of the gas ones than the electric ones, which is part of the reason for the cost differential. But when you consider the federal tax credits, and in Washington, you get another $1,000 from the state, Now the costs are more comparable in terms of essentially the sticker price. But look at this in terms of the 5-year operating costs. Because of that slide we just showed in terms of the miles for the money, instead of almost $10,000 in over 5 years, now you're spending more like $1,500. And these things take virtually no maintenance. Windshield wiper tires, that's literally the maintenance that's required. So over 5 years, you're saving $8,000. So the idea that more expensive is just kind of like not true. And the more the people understand this, the more they'll see why they should probably think they should have done this a long time ago. All right, and then on the topic of resilience, you know, one of the things that's most exciting in terms of resilience and grid efficiency is this vehicle to home and ultimately vehicle to grid capability. So the vehicle to home thing, which is the only thing that's currently available in most places, and even that is spotty because you have to have the right vehicle. Only a few vehicles support this, the Ford F-150 Lightning being the kind of most notable one that really came out with this from the get-go, which is fantastic. Now, it costs, you have to have the right equipment on your home, but it's essentially the same type of equipment that we need for solar panels. And you can plug your car into that. And now you've got 70 to 140 kilowatt hours just sitting there in your driveway, depending on how big your car is. And that's enough to power a home for a week, typically. So here in the Northwest, I don't know about where you are, but power outages in the winter are not abnormal. You know, I'm used to using these small, like Jackery batteries. There's many people are making these small batteries. This one's like, you know, like 1.2 kilowatt hours or something like that. And you can get by with 1 or 2 days with one of those if you're really judicious and use it for cooking and lights and things like that, charging your computers. But this is, your car is equivalent to 50 of those or more. And so this is super exciting from that standpoint of resilience in terms of the way homeowners think about it for during power outages, but it's also incredibly exciting in terms of the grid response, demand response opportunities here, because essentially you've got this equivalent to a power station that's just parked in driveways, because most of the time electric vehicles are parked, and most of the time when they're parked, they're connected to stop charging. Of course, if you've got a peak event happening, you could even be using some of that energy from them if you need it in order to balance your grid loads or other ways that would reduce the cost of our electric transmission. So that's super exciting. Okay, the other thing I wanted to touch on briefly is the incentives that are available. And this is, again, Washington State information. There's a lot of incentives that are available from Puget Sound Energy, as well as the state, and of course, federal tax credits. And this is kind of a roll up of all of those things. But collectively, $2,500 for a heat pump water heater. These devices, that's about what they cost to begin with, or that's more than what they cost, actually. They're more like $1,800. So you're getting close to a free heat water heater because there'll be some installation costs. $6,000 for a heat pump. None that I can see at the moment for induction, unfortunately. And a little bit for an electric dryer, also qualifies from $8,000. You add the vehicle chargers in there, as well as the benefits from the vehicle itself. PSC offers free energy audits for customers who are gas customers of theirs, so they're and want electrification advice. You can get up to $6,500 for weatherization, $600 for wiring and panel upgrades. Huge incentives from this could be more. This is 30% of a typical sized unit. I'm sure you'll be hearing more of that later, and huge incentives as well for battery storage. So it's tens of thousands of dollars that are available from various sources to make the pain of doing this easier. Or the other way of thinking about it is that to make the cost of these highly energy efficient and grid resilient solutions to be in line with their less efficient counterparts, which we might be tempted to buy instead. Then I also like to just point out to people that, you know, this trend towards all these devices is happening. You may not see it, but I am a geek about following the AHRI heating and cooling equipment shipment data. They come out monthly with a report on gas furnace and heat pumps and water heater shipments. And this graph shows, you know, in 2018, about 60% of sales of heating devices in this country were gas furnaces and 40% heat pumps. And it's completely reversed in 2022, and it's going even stronger in 2023. The same is happening with water heaters. So the world is catching up. The population and the Americans are catching up to this idea that heat pumps are just better. And of course, EV sales are also, you know, skyrocketing. It's not as much as what's happening in other parts of the world. It's projected to get to about 8% of total auto sales here in the United States, over 1 million units for the first time in 2023. But in other parts of on the world and collectively, it's closer to 16%. But this is obviously in the United States a very regional thing. And, you know, you'd be interested to know that in San Juan County and King County, it's closer to 25% of new auto sales are from EVs. So again, a few thoughts about policies. And I think Washington State is well positioned with some bedrock policies for 100% renewable energy by 2045. That's key. All electric building codes for new construction, also really key. It sounds like there's still a little last minute finessing of that policy, but that's a really bedrock. And then you start thinking about what we do with existing buildings. These incentives we talked about are great, but building performance standards, which I know this.
Hey, Brian, you're cutting in and out. Apologies. And I think that's not just on my end. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Well,
No
I'm
worries.
finishing up here.
You sound better now.
It looks like it's a little bit better now. Yeah, sorry. And then finally, you know, appliance emission standards is something that's interesting to contemplate. They've adopted these in California and also in New York State, which will basically phase out gas-powered appliances. They won't be available by 2030. And I love to see that in more places. So just some thoughts. Also, I'm sure you're going to hear more about this from solar, but it does seem like we could be smarter about making it easier for people to put rooftop solar on their homes. And then finally, you know, this is just, if you're interested in more, tons of it on our website, and we have a newsletter you could sign up to, and we do webinars on all these topics if you want to go deeper, and they're also on our YouTube channel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian. That was wonderful. And you only cut out a little bit at the end there, so that was fantastic. Appreciate it. We'll have about a couple minutes for questions for Brian, and then we'll turn it over to Kirk. But I did want to bring up a question that Bob posted in the chat. Which electric utility companies are toying with the idea of them having authority to turn on and off serviced houses, AC, and water heating systems? And, you know, it's more efficient holistically, we agree, but it seems kind of intrusive as homeowner,
Right.
also as a renter too, in some cases. So just curious on if you have received information on the utility companies that might be considering that.
Right. I mean, I'm less familiar with it in Washington, but here in Oregon, PGE is doing what they call a test bed in a limited area where they're basically making sure that there's a high number of these kinds of devices, and they're experimenting with how to do this. But I think it's important to note that they're all contemplated in a way where there's the homeowner or the renter has ultimate control. So if, you know, essentially the way the idea of it would be that, you know, if they know they've got a peak event coming up, they would turn your water heater on a few hours beforehand, and they would turn it off. If you wanted to turn it back on, you would be able to do that. And the same would be true with your air conditioning, by the way, that, you know, they would, you know, cool your home a few degrees, pre-cool your home, and then have it ramp down. And then, but if you came into your home and said, hey, the air conditioner's not on, you could turn it on. So the idea is that it doesn't so much, you know, it's, and they're trying to figure out how not to be too intrusive, because it's a good question. You know, you still want to give homeowners the ultimate control.
Thanks for that clarification. I saw Tom, your hand up. Please feel free to, ask your question.
Yes, I can speak for the Snohomish County Public Utility District has said very clearly that they are planning to offer incentives for those who want to voluntarily join the plan. So if you do, then you may be faced with some of your non-essential devices being turned off, reduction of power and so forth, strictly voluntary. And it's also what's happened in other parts of the country is they're experimenting with this, but they're very clear about no mandatory cutoffs.
Yes. Yeah, and there's actually, it reminds me, there's a experiment going in California too, and they were paying people quite hefty sums to be on this. It was an EV charging pilot. It was like $750 to participate in this. And essentially for EVs, it's one of the most it's one of the best ones, because, you know, if they turn off your EV charger for 45 minutes, you wouldn't even know, because, you know, it's not going to really affect how much charge you're getting, most likely anyway, because, you know, you're going to be charging all through the day or night. So I think there's, but the savings from the utility companies is pretty dramatic, because they don't have to turn on these really expensive peaker plants, et cetera. So it's worth it for them to compensate people.
Thanks for sharing. And lastly, and then we'll move on to the next speaker. We have a question in the chat from Jim. What commercial capacity does solar and wind power currently have compared to the grid need? Can you speak to that, Brian, just a little bit?
Sorry, I didn't, I'm not sure I caught the question.
Yeah. So what's the commercial capacity? And Jim, please feel free to chime in too, if I'm reading it correctly, but what commercial capacity does solar and wind power currently have compared to the grid's needs?
Well, I think the question is in terms of generation, like how much energy are we getting from wind and solar today? I think that's the question. It varies around the country, but it's in the realm of, you know, 10 to 15%-ish. It'll vary from place to place. But it's also, the thing that's happening is that it's very close to all the new energy generation for electricity that's happening in this country is wind and solar. So everything forward looking that's being built is wind and solar. And that partly will compensate for retirements of coal plants, et cetera. But also it will compensate for the additional loads that are needed. And eventually it'll start retiring gas power plants.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian, again, for that awesome presentation. And thanks all for engaging in some great questions. We so appreciate your time, Brian, and we look forward to, collaborating with you again. And I think now we'll go ahead and turn it over to Kirk. Please feel free, Brian, to share your website link in the chat and your contact information if you feel
Yes.
comfortable with it, and folks can reach out with more questions. And thank you again so much for that great presentation. And
Thank you.
Kirk,
Thank you.
I'll go ahead and turn it over to you. Let me know if you need any support with screen share.
No, let's give it a shot. First of all, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, can hear you great.
Awesome.
Thanks. That looks great.
Okay. Hello, my name is Kirk Haffner. I had an awesome introduction. Thank you very much. And Brian, yes, that was a great presentation. That really is describing, you know, where we are at and where we can move forward. It's pretty exciting. Well, I'm more kind of feet on the street when it comes to solar and things. And so I'm just going to go ahead and jump in and begin. All right. And I hope I don't run into the same issue. Okay. So first, just a little bit about my background. South Sound Solar was conceived in 2007. We're a full service commercial residential solar installer. One of our specialties is battery backup and off-grid. And that has part to do with my background. I'm interested in it. I have 2 battery backup systems on my property. And as noted, yes, I did build my own electric car, and I'll share a picture about that. But part of what I'm here is I like to say I'm in the third half of my career. The first half was I was a high school math and science teacher, as noted. And so our mission is to educate citizens. We often tell consumers no, that solar isn't right for them. If we don't feel that the solar is being best utilized, or if it's not a good site, or things like that. And I'll talk about that more. We are not out there trying to sell solar. We're not out there going door to door. That is a trend now that's really interesting. We're just an honest local solar installer. And so, yes, back in 2009, I did a project with my son. This was before there was such a thing as a production electric car. And we took a class from a company that specialized in electric car conversions called Electro Automotive. They are since out of business, retired, both on a good range. But yeah, I took a 99 Ford Escort and made it all electric using golf cart batteries. That car is still on the road, 35,000 miles later. And I like to say it's solar powered because I have solar panels all over our office and property, which was mentioned. This was a copy of my electric bill, albeit it was a few years ago before I have 5 employees now with EVs. My electric bill has gone up just a little bit, but we zeroed out every month. This was January. We still had credits left in January, and that was due to net metering. We have a very good net metering law in Washington State. Basically, you get a 1-to-1 kilowatt hour exchange. For every kilowatt hour I put back on the grid, PSE or any other utility owes me a kilowatt hour back. So in January of that year, I still had 2,000 kilowatt hours left that got me through till the middle of March. But, so I'm going to do an aside. Net metering is expiring, essentially. And there is a program by WASIA, the Washington Solar Energy Industry Association, to get net metering back on the ballot. And there's a whole history behind that. I don't want to go in a lot of detail, but it's been approved and lengthened, and the cap was raised several times over the last 15 years or more, since 2005. But that's coming to an end. And there's a belief that net metering costs utilities money. And so we've got a big battle ahead of us. But I think everything that Brian was talking about, everything that we're going to be talking about in terms of electrification, really relies on the fact that we have distributed generation. And the best way to have distributed generation is through a sound and fair net metering policy. So please feel free to check out WASIA. We need to modernize net metering in Washington State. And what's going to happen is, if that does not get improved, we'll see wholesale versus retail rates. We'll buy a kilowatt hour for 10 cents, but they'll buy it back or credit us only a nickel. That's just an example, but it's what's been happening, all across the country. So I'll get off my soapbox when it comes to net metering, but it's really important, and important for, as I said, the electrification movement. It's important for our industry, and I really think it's important for people to have energy independence and energy resiliency to have that option. I was going to show a little video, but because of the interest in time, I'm going to pass. This video is available on the YouTube channel for South Sound Solar and on our website. But the interesting thing about the video that I'll talk to is the variety of installs that we've done, whether on small businesses, nonprofits, community-based organizations, or even we have the name to fame for putting solar on the BIAW building in Tumwater, Washington. So that was a lot of fun. But we'll talk more about how solar can benefit all those different groups. There we go. I think, you know, just real quick, everybody knows solar is our most abundant resource on the planet. There's more energy that hits the earth in an hour than we use an entire year. I haven't seen an update on that, but still, that's pretty amazing. And granted, yes, in Western Washington, we have the lowest solar insolation, that is the amount of light hitting the earth from anywhere on the continental US, but still it works here. And that's what I think is the really important message. This is just a graph. It's kind of a summary of what Brian was talking about. This was from the Rocky Mountain Institute years ago. I mean, this was, boy, 15 years ago, I think, that Amory Levins was thinking about the whole renewable energy system. And this is pretty much where we're getting at, from grid generation to commercial or industrial renewable generation, whether it's solar or wind, to combined heat and power distributed generation, or biogeneration, as it's also sometimes called, to solar power on our houses and electric vehicles, and all of them playing together. That's just what's really cool. And we know solar, it's truly sustainable. There's still a lot of misconceptions out there about if it has, you know, toxic heavy metals and if it's recyclable and other things like that. And the answer is yes, by far, it is the most pollution-free, sustainable energy product we have, other than not using it. But before you go solar, we and many other solar installers have the ethic that we don't want to see solar wasted. If we go into a home and they have electric baseboard heating, we kind of go, no, you know, we don't. They're very inefficient. If we go in and see they have no insulation in the attic, we go, no. Here's a couple insulation companies you can call. Here's an HVAC installer that you can talk to. Give your utility a call about their energy conservation measures. But with conservation, we got so many things out there. Brian highlighted them. Mine is just kind of a quick list, but when it comes especially to remodeling or improving a home, I always like to say, remember, the code is the minimum. And the minimum was a lot lower than it is now 20 years ago. And so upgrade your insulation, get energy efficient appliances, reduce air infiltration. And the newest one that's coming down are smart panels. So individually, you can manage your loads, you know, as opposed to having the utility do it for you. And it's not in my presentation. I did want to comment on that real quick. What wasn't mentioned by Brian and the Snohomish PUD person is we know that time of use rates may be introduced, and we've heard utilities doing a pilot study. Time of use rates means you pay more for electricity at peak times and less for that electricity during times when the demand isn't so great, or potentially when generation is more abundant. And so peak times typically occur in the morning and the evening, and peak generation times in the afternoon. And that's another measure that people will say, utilities will say, helps people to regulate home power, to say, hey, I'm going to, you know, put my water heater on a timer. I'm going to charge my car later when the rates are low. So that's just something that's coming up. Also, energy efficiency. Yes, Brian mentioned these as well. That's something that we advocate for too. And so much so, it's really fun. We have customers that choose to go solar and ask us for advice on how to retire their gas appliances and how much power they'll need, you know, to charge their car now, in addition to using a heat pump or using a heat pump water heater. And we can calculate that in sizing the system and looking at the cost benefit analysis of solar. That's something we like to do. So just a reminder on the big ones, the old expression was reduce, reuse, recycle. And, you know, now we're adding renewable energy into the mix for basic ideas for reducing our carbon footprint. So it's happening all over the place. This is the Mason County Fire District. They received a grant to do solar. We were really happy to do that. So even on public buildings and first responder buildings, there's grants available. and organizations that are helping to support win those grants to put in a solar system. This is the wall O inverters on that system. But what's really interesting now, and we'll lead into battery backup, it was several years ago that I heard an engineer who actually helps write the NEC code state that we are approaching the time when solar and energy storage systems become the primary source of power, and the utility becomes the backup. And when he said it, I didn't believe it. I said, yeah, I don't see that within 5 years. Well, by golly, we're doing it. And this is an example of a house. The owner has a really nice house, a lot of roof area. You can see it's both on the east and west side. The east side is towards the water, west side is facing us, and a little bit on the south. And he put in that large solar system and Tesla Powerwall battery backup. And this system has the capability to provide emergency power if he's off grid. And if he manages his loads, I should say managing their loads, it's a husband and wife team, they could be indefinitely off power for the majority of their house. Now, granted, we're not backing up all the loads, we're backing up one of the 2 panels, but it is a majority of the loads in the house. And so with the solar operating and with the batteries on reserve, he could choose to use self-consumption and exercise the batteries more and meet his needs. Right now, he has net meter. Right now, he can just let it go to the utility and it comes back as a credit easily, okay? And the house was designed to net zero, but down the road, he does have the capacity to be more self-reliant and practice more self-consumption with the battery systems. This is another example battery system that's on a large place. We can get by with a single solar or whole house battery backup. In these cases, we've just had larger homes or more consumption because they have switched to more renewables. They're charging several electric cars. They have an ADU that's additional power for an elderly family member, all great things that are happening, plus the solar. Again, we are a certified Tesla installer. This is the same thing. This is a full house battery backup using the Tesla Powerwalls and the Tesla Gateway. What's really cool is we're getting much better at installing these. It takes a bit. It's a little complicated, but we also are getting good support from L&I, the electrical authority, and from the utilities, PSE in this case. Puget Sound Energy, by the way, have stated publicly to us that they are committed to net metering, and they have that track record. When the previous target was only 0.5%, PSE exceeded that 0.5% and didn't say anything. They just keep letting people on the grid. Now the target is 4%, which they'll meet in 2024, and that's why I did mention the net metering legislation that we're pushing for, Stand Up for Solar, and you can go back and look at that. We have talked in net metering about distributed solar going above 100 kilowatts to 1 megawatt, which is industrial utility scale, which is exciting. It's exciting. PSE has distributed solar grants for community-based NPOs, and we've been lucky enough to work with, probably a dozen community nonprofit organizations in one just segment of what we work in. We're at our 4th food bank now, and those were largely funded by PSE solar grants, which is pretty cool. I mentioned time of use rates, and PSE has also suggested they may be looking at single-family battery storage that they can connect to in a pilot program. Please don't go contacting them yet about this. This is, information. They'll say they'll have it on their website more when it's available, when it opens up. This is a little teaser, but just to know, the utility and others besides PSE are looking at ways to continue to support the electrification goal while still meet their distribution requirements, their spending targets, and their customer needs. Battery backup is an old technology. I mean, this was a system we did way back in 2016. You can see how things have changed just a little bit in terms of the batteries. Those are all flooded lead acid. Now they're more lithium. And we've had some great fun with battery backup doing off-grid. The system on the right, and that's represented, that's actually up at Mount Rainier for the heliopad for the Couch Creek Center. And we were lucky enough to work with the National Park Service to install that so that they could have consistent off-grid power with radio communications. And this stand actually tilts to follow the sound. We've also had done some crazy installs, and a few were mentioned in the bio, but THS is one we're really proud of. You can see the letters there. These were funded by TransAlta grants, which are still available, and the Washington Department of Commerce grants, and Washington Department of Commerce grants for nonprofits and community-based organizations, and municipalities and tribal entities have all increased in both the number and funding. So that's really exciting. But this was way back, I think 2017 when we did this. So yeah, 6 years ago. Centralia College was another one mentioned, and again, same, it was grant funded. So I wanted to just emphasize, I really think it's cool that we're getting public institutions and municipalities doing solar with public money. So my top 11 list when it comes to solar is, as they say, solar on your home. I would take that up. 0 is, of course, energy efficiency, standard improvements that you can do, should do, so that the solar energy that you generate is not wasted, so to speak, that it's used efficiently. And the options are solar on a second home if you don't have a good site, supporting family and friends. We love working with families where parents are buying solar for their kids, or vice versa. Solar on a nonprofit, churches, schools. We've done YMCAs, and the Hands-On Children's Museum just got solar. Supporting utility solar programs, and Snohomishu's representative has some utility scale programs that were community solar. Neighborhood solar campaigns, pitching with the neighbors, hey, what if you and I go in together and we save it all? Community solar programs are much more active, thanks in large part to an organization called Olympia Community Solar. And there is legislation before I'll slow down. Legislation coming up this session. Affordable housing, we just are really grateful. We're kind of the go-to installer for an organization called Homes First. We're doing the Habitat for Humanity store in Yelm. We did Camp Coyote in Tumwater, Martin. We're really proud of that. And again, you can look those up. Camp Coyote is very inspirational. It's the first tiny home, one of the first tiny home encampments. I think it is the first in Western Washington, and every single tiny home now has solar on. Please support the legislation that I had mentioned. One thing that we didn't mention that's really important besides net metering and the electrification rules is code adoption. The energy code keeps driving up standards for efficiency of renewable energy. It does face a lot of backlash. We're worried about the cost of housing, and if housing is still affordable for a standard, middle income family. But I think the state is managing that process very well. There's net metering, there's grants that I mentioned that are available. And again, we just hope that people can support all of these efforts. So I'm going to stop there, and I thank you for your time, and I welcome any questions.
That was great. Thank you so much, Kirk. Does anyone have any questions for Kirk? John, looks like you've got your hand up.
Yeah, Kirk, what a great presentation. Thank you so much. And Brian, that was really good as well. Kirk, I just want to ask you, what do we need to do to get net metering continued in our state in a big way, since that's such an important part of making the whole system work? What do we have to do politically or legislatively to really push that forward?
So there's probably 3 things. One is if you can just support the WASHCIA, Washington Solar Energy Industry Association Stand Up for Solar campaign. Part of the pushback on the full net metering is coming from the utilities, both private IOUs and public utility districts, that see it as a cost burden. But one of the key things on that is there's no data. In fact, the data that I've seen shows just the opposite. Solar is a net benefit for all consumers. The argument is that there's cost shifting. People that have solar are not paying their share of utility maintenance and service. If there's data to support that, I would support that. If there's not data to support that, I think net metering and the benefits of net metering in terms of affordability, resiliency, self-generation, distributed energy far outweigh a few pennies that may be hitting the utilities. So that's the number one. Contact your legislature, understand more about it, form your, hopefully informed opinion, and contribute to that campaign. Thanks.
Kirk, we have a couple questions that came in the chat. One from Eric that said, can you explain briefly what you mean by net metering being dead? And can homeowners who aren't signed up now still access it?
Yeah, net metering, let me be clear, is not dead. There is a cap at 4% that says, well, utilities do not have to allow people to continue to net meter basically with a kilowatt hour per kilowatt hour exchange. And so that is happening across utilities. And the good news is, the really good news is, most utilities are honoring the net metering agreement. They will not make a drastic change. Usually they'll give, homeowners what has been on record is anywhere from 6 months to 2 years, right? So don't panic. Again, don't believe the door-to-door salesman that says net metering is ending, net metering is dead. I did not say that. Just if you're going to do solar, and you want to consider it, and be aware of what utilities programs are. And PSE has always, for us, been true to their word. Okay. I hope that answered your question. I don't want to create a rush or undue misinformation that would be hit the utility.
Thanks for that clarification, Kirk. Yeah, appreciate that. Okay. And then we have one more question from Bob. I hear less and less about hot water solar heaters. Is it a matter of simplicity to not have to run additional pipes outside? And Bob, please feel free to elaborate too if you'd like.
I can speak to it. I have solar hot water, or I said had solar hot water. I actually took mine off my roof and I had to re-roof. We used to do solar hot water. We did a lot of systems, and I have to be honest. The electrical, mechanical, plumbing components on it are cumbersome. The problem with solar hot water that we've experienced is they are pretty expensive, and a $10 part can wear out and result in $1,000 of repair if your pump cavitates. So we found that we are decommissioning more systems than we are, we're not just installing anymore. And the other reason for that is we really feel that the combination of heat pump water heaters, which are very energy efficient in a way they're solar, they collect the heat that's available in the ambient air and concentrate it down and make hot water, and they're great, and they have a 10-year warranty, and they're a fraction of the cost, okay? And you put solar panels on your roof to drive them. So, I'm just being realistic when it comes to solar hot water. I don't really think it's the right solution for rooftop mounting anymore, especially in our climate. We're not seeing the gains. In other climates, it still may make sense. We have such the marine climate, October through March through the winter months. So that's why more and more, I think I only know of one company that is still installing solar hot water. We will service our customers. And most people are advocating for the switch over to heat pumps and solar PV.
That makes sense. Thank you so much, Kirk. Appreciate that. Awesome. I'll pause for questions there. And again, thank you so much for that great presentation. And before we wrap up tonight's evening, myself and a executive board member put together a couple slides on induction cooking. So Kirk, if you don't mind, I'll take over the screen and wrap up tonight's electrification event. Awesome. Can you see my screen okay? Great. Lucas Johnson, he's with Valley Homes, helped me put together some of these slides, as well as our mechanical team here at Rushing Engineering. I just wanted to touch on a couple fun facts about induction cooking and provide a fun case for induction in your next home project, retrofit, and even restaurant. Oh, sorry, let me go back. I do want to add a disclaimer just for safety precautions for those using pacemakers. Due to the electromagnetic interference, it is recommended to keep a distance of at least 2 feet between the induction stovetop and your pacemaker. I'll post in the chat, there's some more information that the CDC has posted, but do know that not all induction stoves do tend to interfere with pacemakers. So I wanted to touch on the indoor air quality benefits from switching to induction ranges. Natural gas ranges and cooktops produce more indoor pollution than most people realize. Gas burners emit a host of dangerous pollutants, including particulate matter, formaldehyde, carbon monoxide, and nitrogen oxides. Dr. Shelley of the University of Colorado explained that when a stove burns natural gas, just as when a car burns gasoline, combustion oxidizes molecules into the air that creates those nitrogen oxides, which can make us sick. Nitrogen oxides, which are not regulated indoors, have been linked to an increase in heart attacks, asthma, and other respiratory diseases. Homes with gas cooking have anywhere between 50 and 400% higher concentrations of nitrogen dioxide than homes without. And according to some recent EPA research in a study by the UCLA Fielding School of Public Health, children in homes with gas stoves are 42% more likely to have asthma than children whose families that use electric and/or induction. Ventilation requirements are quite needed when cooking with gas. To reduce the nitrogen emissions in your home, the EPA recommends using an exhaust fan above your gas stove that's vented to the outdoors, but there are currently not really any regulations requiring exhaust fans to vent outdoors, except most recently in the Seattle Energy and Washington State Energy codes. Many small apartments lack this form of ventilation, especially the apartment I'm living in, due to the lack of regulations in the market. And a lot of the fans simply recirculate the air. We have just a simple recirculation air hood in our apartment. And so rather than venting it outside, it just recirculates it. A performance and adequacy study was conducted of hoods around the United States, and it showed that between 15 and 98% of emissions were captured, depending on positioning and airflow. So people who don't often use range hoods find them to be noisy and distracting, or just often forget them. In a 2014 study by Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, they found that cooking with gas for 1 hour without ventilation adds up to about 3,000 parts per billion of carbon monoxide into the air. So it's really important to run that fan if you do have a gas stove, and just shows the needed ventilation with these systems. Regardless, though, of the theoretical potential of hoods and other ventilation to keep the air clean, it's clear that current practices leave quite a lot of unsafe indoor air pollution in your home. And to remedy that, standards for ventilation and hoods would have to be tightened, standardized, and subjected to stricter enforcement. I want to touch a little bit on efficiency here. This is a fun video that I'm going to mute, but just as I'll talk here, you can kind of see the efficiency benefits coming with induction. Because induction appliances only create heat through pots and pans on their surfaces, they are much more efficient than traditional cooktop appliances. Induction appliances are up to 3 times more efficient than gas stoves and up to 10% more efficient than conventional smooth top electric ranges. This improved efficiency performance can result in lower energy costs, as well as lower rates of air pollution associated with energy generation. This also leads to faster cook time. I do want to address there's a general misunderstanding that you need special cookware. Please note that as long as your cookware has stainless steel or iron or any sort of non-stick pans as well. If there's a magnetic component to your cookware, it will heat with induction stovetops. And then I want to just talk briefly on long-term savings. Induction stoves haven't always been very financially accessible. However, the good news is that prices have fallen considerably. Some 4-burner induction ranges now cost about the same as a high-quality gas range stove. While not yet available, President Biden's Investing in America plan will soon allow many Americans that replace their gas or conventional electric cooktop with an induction cooktop to be eligible for rebates up to $840. So please keep in the loop of President Biden's plan, and as well as learning more at our all-new Energy Savings Hub, where owners and renters can save money while also saving the planet. And the Northwest Eco Building Guild, we're working on an IRA, as well as other incentive programs, webpage and resource links. So folks, and especially homeowners, can learn about the special rebates that will be made available with different retrofit strategies such as these. I love this picture, and I just want to brag that this is a Northwest Eco Building Guild's builder home. I believe this is a photo of one of Targa Homes, who is hosting the Hard Hat series. He installed just a beautiful induction smooth cooktop there as well. And then lastly, this is a great video that I'll actually post in the chat, but there's some really great precise temperature control. A lot of misconceptions around gas being kind of the superior, classy, chef's preferred way of cooking is not always the case. You know, and there's actually quite a lot of chefs in the region. This one in particular we love. He's based in Seattle, as well as done some cooking abroad, argues that, you know, it can be exhausting working in a hot kitchen all day. That is, you know, has a lot of open flames and safety issues, whereas the induction stovetop doesn't heat up. It uses that electromagnetic system to heat the electrons within the pans that then heat the food. So there's no heat coming off that stove, which really helps lower temperatures in a hot, bustling kitchen, and ultimately improves comfort, as well as really easy cleanup. There's no crevices or any sort of holes or anything like that. It's a clean, very smooth surface that makes just chefs' lives so much easier. And for more information, I'll post some links in the chat. And I just wanted to provide some fun info and tidbits on induction stovetops for folks who are able and to make that retrofit switch. It's a great alternative. Thank you. That's all I have. And with that, I'll ask for folks to take a look at some other questions here in the chat. So this time of the evening, we usually open it up for discussion and final questions. And so I'll refer to the chat now. And please feel free to, if you're comfortable, turning on your camera, unmuting, and we just welcome open dialogue and discussion on tonight's presentations. So we have a couple that just got posted. Let's see here. John, you asked what company is currently doing solar hot water? Is this a question maybe Kirk, you can answer for John Alexander? He's asking what company is currently doing solar hot water?
Well, as I said, we'll service our systems and other systems in our area. But Sunworks LLC out of Puyallup. The last I talked to them, they're still installing new systems and servicing systems.
I'm sorry, Kirk, could you repeat that name? I didn't quite get that.
Sunworks
Okay.
LLC out of Puyallup.
Great, because I was working with Silk Road out of Centralia and until Ray passed. And I just need to find someone to finish a system because I find the solar hot water makes sense in some limited situations still.
Sure.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Kirk. We've got a question from Eric, and maybe Brian and Kirk, you can tackle this one. What do presenters think are the biggest barriers to the adoption of some of these electrification of home appliances?
Yeah, I think I'll jump in there and Kirk add whatever you think, but I think the first barrier is just people are not aware of them. It's surprising how few people really know these things exist. So there's that. And then the second has been the high upfront cost that they because typically they're more expensive than the things that they compete with. But they're so much more efficient. You know, they can pay for that cost goes away long term, but the upfront cost is higher. And the IRA really is helping in that regard because it's sort of levelizing the costs. And then I think there's also just misinformation that's out there from a lot of it from gas utilities, from the gas industry, from the fossil fuels industry. Like there's a lot of people are talking about, well, you know, I don't want to get rid of my gas furnace because, you know, I need to have backup. I need to have heat when the power goes off. Well, your gas furnace doesn't work when the power goes off. And, you know, your gas water heater, if it's a good one, won't go off either, won't work either. And so your gas fireplace will work, your gas stove will work. But as you just said, you know, you got to be really careful about using a gas stove. If you don't have ventilation, you won't have ventilation if the power goes off. So the idea that they're more resilient is kind of a little bit of a myth, but that's out there as a reason. And then there's just been this kind of perception that gas, particularly on the cooking side, is kind of the premium solution. But that's changing fast. You know, we do a lot of work with real estate agents, and they're really starting to see already that electric homes people are asking about them. People see the value of things like induction and that sort of thing. So I think all these things will change, but it's sort of like it needs all of us to be advocates and to influence our friends and family and our neighbors and clients and anyone we talk to about the benefits to just speed this transition up.
Thank you, Brian. That's great.
And
Jack. Oh, go ahead, Kirk.
I was just going to do a short ad. You know, the great thing about solar and a lot of these movements is they're more consumer driven than they are industry driven. And as consumers make the demands, then the industry has to catch up. And sometimes the industry is a little bit slow. And the trades are a good one. They built the house the same way for the last 30 years. And, you know, they could be hesitant to change. But they're all learning. It's coming along. The rebates that are coming through the utilities help drive it. But I want to be clear, I am not a prohibitionist when it comes to fossil fuels. And I could go into details on why I think the appropriate use of fuels is necessary and in some cases life-saving. But I really agree wholeheartedly in a mass reduction in our use of fossil fuels. And so, you know, just a little one, if you had a water tank in the middle of the house, a heat pump water heater might not necessarily work. It's got to be more strategically placed so that it can vent outside, just as one example. But, you know, for the most part, look into it. There's great rebates, and you can have a lot of the cost covered through the utilities by making upgrades in energy efficiency.
Thank you so much. And I agree, Kirk, with that statement. I appreciate you sharing that. Jack asked a quick question on how durable is I assume he meant induction stove surface. So while the induction stove top is made with a glass ceramic top, it is pretty durable. For family members of mine who have the privilege of cooking with induction, one of their favorite things to use is their cast iron tools and pots and pans on the induction because it just heats so wonderfully and very quickly. But they do tend to be a little bit more careful just because that glass surface can scratch a little bit, but nothing out of the ordinary. You should see my gas stove. I'm a renter here, and so we have a gas appliance, and the grates or the grill, excuse me, are pretty scratched up from, I'm sure, just use and abuse. But so, it's comparable. But I would say that surface is still very durable, just keeping in mind that it is made of glass ceramic composite. And it is true, unfortunately, you cannot use aluminum pans.
Ooh, but you wouldn't want to use aluminum anyway. It's super dangerous. That's like really bad for your health. The copper bottom ones are the ones that I think, if people have those are the ones that won't work, that you might be disappointed with, but most everything else will work. And
Jack, you asked a great question on the oven piece of an induction stove. I've only seen the ranges and then the ovens separate, and it was electric that my folks have. And so they have the range on the island, and then on the kitchen island, and then the stove kind of up near the cabinets, or excuse me, not stove, the oven in the cabinets, and that's electric. So separate appliances. But I am curious, Kirk or Brian, if you've seen an induction oven set. I'm sure if you Googled it, you could kind of research more.
we have one. It's they're almost always I think they always are electric ovens, or unless a really fancy one might have like a steam oven, but it would also be electric. But yeah, electric oven, which is, bakers will tell you, the best solution because they're very consistent in terms of temperature. Electric resistance, yes. Most of the high-end gas ranges also have electric resistance ovens, because gas ovens are notoriously unreliable and unpredictable in terms of temperature.
Right.
Some people don't realize this, but the gas in our homes varies in terms of its energy intensity from season to season. So it's not like a consistent thing.
Agreed. Bob, you have your hand up.
I just turned off my mic. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for this presentation. It's really interesting stuff here. Just a question, big picture. We're kind of in a next chapter of solar and energy storage in homes. And from what I've seen, the earlier generations didn't think anything about recyclability and long-term life cycle of the products, whether they're the panels or the energy storage or anything else. And they're all early adopters are starting to come to the end of their life. And we're going to start to see a lot of stuff going into landfills. When I think about overall sustainability, are the companies really starting to take it seriously and think about these issues, or are we still too early in the adoption to worry about that? Go fast, go now.
I'd be willing to take that on. Yeah, I understand. Washington State got ahead of the game and passed essentially a solar panel recycling mandate for panels that were going to be sold in the state, saying, okay, you have to have a plan on how they're going to get recycled after you're done, or after they're, have gone through their usable lifespan, or if they've been broken, things like that. That has been delayed from implementation. And one of the issues, to be honest, that's an issue in the recycling world, is not enough product, because panels are very durable. But I think the key thing there is there are a lot of initiatives. We pay to have our panels shipped to a private company that does the recycling on them. And it's cheaper, the same cost, or maybe a little more than taking them to the landfill if I have a broken panel, for example. but that's something that we do. And I know a lot of other installers have that ethic. But the key too is those panels are almost 100% recyclable, just like a lead acid battery. A lot of people don't realize they want the whole battery back, and they charge you extra if you don't bring it back because they want to put it back through the hopper, gather all those materials, and make new batteries. And with solar panels, the silicon, the metals that are through the trace lines, the aluminum frame, all that is recyclable. And so we'll see how that goes, but just to know there is a positive movement out there to address that issue.
Yeah, I think you could say the same for batteries, battery recycling. You know, I see in my news feed almost every day or every week a new battery recycling center that's come online for EV batteries, but it's sort of the same thing that Kirk was just mentioning. There aren't enough of them yet to make it really a viable thing. So they're all kind of small pilots. But the point is, I think there are a lot of people thinking about it and working on it. And there's some valuable materials in batteries that I think it will, in the long run, it will be an economic advantage to be recycling these things. But yeah, it isn't really, I would say, widespread yet, but it's starting. You can see it.
Yeah, there's some horror stories out there of unscrupulous quote unquote recycling centers, and then they just put them on a ship and go to other countries and dump everything for money.
Yeah.
And, you know,
I think that's I would
horrible.
say that worry is a bigger worry for things like TVs than it is and cheap electronics than it is for EVs and that sort of thing. You know, on the battery side, the batteries that have been around the longest are the hybrid batteries from it's like Priuses and that sort of thing. And what you're finding is that rather than recycling them, what they're being used because they degrade, but they still have some capacity. They're just degraded. So they're degraded to a point where they don't work in a car anymore. But what they're being used for utility storage and all sorts of other ways. So I think the first thing you're going to see is that the lifespan of a lithium battery is going to be way longer than you think, because there will be these second and third uses that, you know, people will find for them.
Down cycle.
Ultimately, they'll be recycled. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a shame, you know, some of the first generation electric cars, you know, they get up to their 8 and 10 year life, and it's more expensive to replace the battery than to just get rid of it and buy another one. That's a horrible life cycle, but you know, we're getting better as humans. Let's hope. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Bob. That's some great questions. Eric, you asked a question regarding any sort of public influence, advocacy, information, resources to influence the type and quantity of electrified appliances available to renters, given they make up 1/3 of households in Washington state. I appreciate you asking this question and empathize with it quite a lot. Just a personal experience because I'm in the industry, did kind of a cost analysis for my landlord. They weren't expecting it, but I showed them, hey, here's the benefits of a heat pump. Here's what you can do to electrify some of these appliances we have here in our home. And they didn't do much with it, unfortunately. So I'm going to leave it to Brian and Kirk to talk about homeowner incentives and kind of what those incentive programs can push.
It's a great question, because the issue that you have with renters is and rental units is that most of the time the tenants pay the utility bills one way or another, but the owners own the equipment, and so you've got this mismatch of motivations. So the landlords aren't necessarily motivated to upgrade the equipment to more energy efficient stuff because they're not paying the bills. So that is a problem, and there are a few kind of workarounds that I've heard of. One is there are some of these DIY type solutions that are available, and some of which will be incentivized through the IRA with the low income rebate program. So for instance, you could be in a rental apartment and buy an induction stove and get one for a really low cost and just have it put in, and then that's possible. But that feels a little bit like, I'm just not sure how much that's going to happen. I mean, I'm not sure how excited you would be about buying an induction stove for a place that you might be leaving in a little while. But there are other things like those cold climate heat pumps that I was talking about, which could be DIY and you could take with you. I think the more systemic solution, though, those are kind of hacks. I feel like, the systemic solution is that you have to get the landlords to be motivated to improve the efficiency of their properties. And so that's why you get into these building performance standards type of legislation. And I know Washington State is working on that. And there's I think the two big targets there are commercial buildings for one, and the other is our multifamily and rental units and that sort of thing, where they're required to improve the efficiency over time, and otherwise they get penalized or fined, and there can be incentives that are available to them, but to do it, but you have to have a little bit of a carrot with the stick, or a little stick with a carrot, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you, Brian. It's great information. See here, just John asked, are some solar PV panels have significantly higher embodied energy than others? And where to get that information on that? A lot of what we look into for our consulting services at Rushing is looking at the embodied carbon, of course, not only on building materials, but also equipment materials, and looking at the life cycle costs on that. And so as a piece of John's question, Kirk, or Brian, has there been some embodied energy and embodied carbon studies on solar PV panels? And if there are information on that, such as EPDs or something like that?
Well, in terms of just the embodied, they've done it kind of on a generic basis, that a solar panel can produce as much electricity that it took to make the solar panel within 2 to 5 years. And after that, it's free energy. So the energy that took in mining and manufacturing and transportation and all of that. Is there a list that's panel by panel? Not that I'm aware of. But I do agree with the comment about, that's why our value for our company is we buy the Made in Washington product, and the SILFAB is a premium product. It's a really good panel. They have North American manufacturing primarily for all of their panels. And we don't really agree with buying cheap imports. The quality may not be there, the warranty may not be there, and then just looking at what the value of our clientele is. And the clientele is local, sustainable. I think those are values of the Eco Builder Guild, so that's all good. But yeah, it's what I would say with anything on this, look at a reputable, established, trusted, whether it's a manufacturer of the solar panel or an installer of the panel as well. And I think that can go with any product.
Thank you.
Can I just add there, I think this is a little bit more about, a related question I get a lot, which is, shouldn't I hold on to my car for as long as possible, or my furnace for as long as possible before I replace it with one of these better things, or a water heater? And usually the answer to that question is yes, like with furniture or clothing or anything like that, where the carbon footprint of that device is only the embodied energy. And the same would be true of, like a wood laminate beam or something like that. You should use that thing as long as possible before you replace it or scrap it. But with the case of these devices that burn fossil fuels, as Kirk said, for a solar panel, it's going to offset it, or get you as much energy as it took to make it in 1 year. When you look at cars, they will produce roughly the same carbon emission in 1 year of operation that it took to make it. So the idea that you should keep it around for a long time doesn't make sense in that context. And it's something that is a little bit hard, new trick for us, folks who've been in the environmental space for a long time to absorb, because we're used to this idea we should hold on to things as long as possible. It's not true with things that burn fossil fuels. You should get rid of them as quickly as possible. you should recycle them if possible. Cars, you kind of most likely you're going to resell, but lawnmowers, for example, there's no advantage to keeping that gas lawnmower around. You should scrap it and have it recycled and get an electric one as soon as possible, because that's a way lower carbon footprint equation after 1 year than what we can think is the good thing to do is hold on to it till it dies.
Thanks, Brian. That's insightful. Kind of turns my thinking on its head. Appreciate it. Wonderful. We'll do one or two more questions because I know we're getting late in this in this event tonight, but I appreciate everyone's great discussion and really awesome questions. Kim just asked, is there legislation to provide smaller EV cars, potential, and just the observation is it seems like they're getting bigger and bigger and more expensive.
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, on the more expensive side, if you track Tesla, which is it's really the only EV that has made it into mass production. All other EVs are relatively small quantities of production compared to gas vehicles. But the Model 3 and the Model Y are now made in the same kind of quantities that gas cars are made in some cases more. So you're starting to see the economies of scale finally happen. Tesla is the only brand really, other than the Chinese manufacturers, that have seen that. So prices are actually coming down for Tesla models. And if you've been tracking that, you'll see that they're lower cost now than they were, and they continue to lower their prices. But the observation that, that a lot of these cars are big and have huge batteries is a good observation. And it's a pretty important point, because I think our obsession with long range means big batteries. And big batteries means you're using a lot of material and all these kinds of things that maybe you don't need to use if we had a better charging infrastructure, so that people would be more comfortable with, batteries that weren't, some people are talking about 700 miles of range and things like that. It's ridiculous. But also you have a really big car like a truck, and then you need a lot of batteries because it weighs so much. So I do think you're raising a good point that this whole thing might usher in a little bit more awareness of the advantages of smaller, lighter weight cars, because it's definitely a thing. Smaller batteries, you get more range and lower costs. Yeah. So, but I haven't heard of any legislation to make that happen. To your specific question.
Thanks, Brian.
Again, it's consumer driven. I just heard good news. We bought a Bolt EUV as a sales car. I think it's a great car. It's one of the lower cost EVs, and GM had announced that they were discontinuing it, and then they've announced that they're bringing it back. So make your voices heard, consumer buying.
That's great. Those are great cars. Yeah, those are great cars.
And so, hey, I'm sorry, I've got a hard stop at 8:30. I want to thank you very much, but I've got to get some other calls made to make sure business can run tomorrow, if that's okay. But thank you all. I got to run.
Thank you so much, Kirk.
Sure.
Okay.
Great to see you.
Good night.
Thanks. Well, thanks all. I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up there. Appreciate all the awesome questions. And again, thank you so much to our speakers, our sponsors, as well as folks who provided information, insight, resources, and links for tonight's presentations. We appreciate all of your support in sharing this information. Please join us for the upcoming education retreat, where we'll be planning out the 2024 monthly education series. We'd love to hear your insight of topics in the green building industry you'd like to see covered. And thank you again so much, Brian. It was a pleasure, as well as Kirk. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your evening. I'll stay on just a moment or two longer, and if you have any questions about the Northwest Eco Building Guild, other than that, have a great fall. And I'll see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, Brian. Have a good evening. Thanks all for joining. And thanks, Linda, for those great questions in the chat. Appreciate you, Linda. Thanks, Bob.
I do have a
get any
question about,
answers?
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. I didn't know if I got any answers. Did I step away for a second and not have them? Oh, I see
There's a couple answers from Brian
Brian.
regarding your first question that you
Yeah.
posted. And then I think maybe Eric answered your second one.
Okay, just curious.
Yeah, let me
Yeah,
know.
yeah, I think it was just the one on there used to be more of like, spinning dry, and then people would have areas that, they would hang clothes in because they were
Oh, yeah.
almost dry. So, or at least pulling them out, but there's none of that going on, is there?
Well, clothes hangers are actually Built Green credits. If you are certifying your house with Built Green, an area to hang clothes to dry is actually extra credits and points towards your certification, which is kind of fun. That's the only instance I've seen that.
Yeah, because there used to be houses that would use those spaces. So yeah, just curious. Thanks.
Thanks, Linda.
Which certification are you referring to?
The Built Green certification program.
Oh,
It's a
okay.
Washington State's leading residential certification program. I can post a link in the chat.
Because I'm a lead AP building design and construction certified, but I don't use it much because, well, I'm an engineer at Boeing, so I don't need it in my job.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
But
I'm a lead AP and I use it every day. Walking builders and designers through their checklists. We also provide consulting for Built Green as well. And we love the Built Green program, while not as cost competitive for larger buildings and commercial buildings. It's a great checklist with really neat, innovative strategies to earn points. And it uses the Washington State Energy Code. Sorry about that.
is your company in Seattle?
Yeah, we're right off Westlake.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my wife and I moved from Puyallup to Centralia a dozen years ago. She has a horse habit. So.
Very nice. That's awesome.
But she commutes to Tacoma, and I used to commute to Renton. But I don't have to commute as much anymore, which is nice.
Oh, good. That's
Save
good.
a lot on fuel, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I know.
Thanks for your time, everybody. Have a nice night.
You as well. Thanks, all.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you for covering the induction. That was nice.
No problem. I hope it was short and sweet, yet informative.
I thought it was.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks, Linda.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate you. Have a great evening.
You too.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.